Welcome back to my tutorials. I know it's been a while, so forgive me for my absence. Today we are going to be working predominantly on shadows and highlights and those nasty, nasty dark clothes that actually have hardly any depth at all. Though in world, if you have Second Life, obviously, you'll notice that they look more real and better. And then when you pull them into a picture, there's no depth. You have to get really close to see the depth. So as you see, all I did with this so far was I pulled out the background. As usual, my fair warning, people do come into my room. There's always interruptions, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm going to just go from beginning to end, so it won't just be shadows and highlights, though that's kind of what I want to focus on today. The other things that we will be doing today is, as you see the redraw clothing, you'll notice that our necklace is missing parts here. We're going to learn how to fill in those details. You'll notice that he's supposed to have a little stubble here. We're going to try to redo the stubble, fix ears, all of this, these little glitches. I actually took this on an ultra setting, so no matter how good your settings, there's a very good chance you're going to pick up these types of minute detail mess-ups. So it's always good to know how to fix that. So first thing we're going to start with is we're going to smooth over some of this hiccups. Now I work with a very large picture. That's something that I keep forgetting to mention. The larger the picture you work with, the better. Within reason, obviously. Because it helps you refine details so that when you crop, cut, and make it smaller later, it looks more HD. It just looks better. So I'm going to start with the ears. And again, I say this in most of my videos, everybody's different. Everybody's going to edit differently. This is just how I edit my pictures. So if you've seen my work, I'm not bad. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have at 100 strength. I'm using a soft brush, but I don't want a completely soft brush. I'm going to come into this ear as close as I can get it. I am using a tablet. Shrink my brush a little more. There we go. A little harder. Let's go about half hard. There we go. And now let's fix this ear to look more like an ear, shall we? I'm simply just using the smudge tool, which is over here. And right now I'm just smudging the shape of the ear because it looks funny and weird. I like the smudge tool because I can smudge the color out and in. You can also use the liquify tool, which is right here, which we will also be using, but not quite yet. So let's make this more of a real ear, shall we? Okay. Now, depending on your detail length, you might want to do this throughout the whole piece. I'm going to also show you another way to help taper some of this pixelization here. I saw a tutorial from somebody else who did an amazing job using the pen mask here. Now, I don't do that because, I mean, I have my limits. In other words, I don't know how, even though I've watched the tutorial, which was really good, by the way, if you guys find it. I'll try to refine it and put it in one of my descriptions. Right now I'm smudging, or blurring. I'm using a blur tool at 100% strength, though really you shouldn't use it at 100% strength. That way, less mistakes, because you can always go over it more than once. And I'm going to start blurring these hard pixel edges here, all the way up. And don't worry if it looks a little blurry, because the shadows and highlights that we're going to do is going to bring back some of this detail. And as usual, I'm going to redraw the hair. Pretty much everything on the face. Try not to blur things like the eyebrows, and if you blur underneath the eyes, because sometimes you'll get those little eye lumps, which he doesn't have. You can use your blur on that too. And if you're doing a real picture, like a real person, the blur tool is great for the under eyes before you highlight and make it more glamour and glossed over. There we go. Okay, I'm going to show you what that little bit of blurring and smudging did. Oh, I might want to fix that here a little more. Just kind of gave him a little bit more of a smooth look. Yeah, a little more blurry, but again, the shadows and highlights will fix that. We're going to do this blur thing to all these edges, any edge that's important. This is a process, so you kind of need a good portion of patience. There we go. Now there's other ways to do this, like I said. On the outside, depending on my mood, I may use the blur tool, I may use the smudge tool, or I may just, when I'm cropping him or her out of the background, you can use the refine edge and smooth it that way, which I believe I've showed you in the past, but I'll give you a quick glance. Let's hypothetically, we were just going to use this top half. So refine edge, I right-clicked on the place that I selected. I selected with my awesome auto select tool. Refine edge. And now if you see here, when it's refining, you can move the edge, shift it in, and I can feather it. See how perfectly smooth that is? And there's actually literally a smoothing tool. Now if we come in closer, you can see what that smoothing tool does, depending on where you have that edge. So let's say I wanted no feathering but smoothing. I took off all the feathering, and you'll notice I didn't have to blur anything, it just auto does this. Oop, ignore that. Now I'm going to bring it down so you can see what it looks like. All to see our little things gone. So let's bring the smoothing back down, and there's all those rough edges again. See? So I'm going to cancel for now. Now if I wanted to cheat, you can select the whole thing even after you've taken it out of the background. Make sure it gets everything but stays along the edges. There we go. Different people use the refined edge in different ways. Personally, I like to do it on a separate layer versus a layer mask. So see, I have mine set to a new layer. If you want it as a layer, new layer with a layer mask, new document with a layer mask, or simply a layer mask. Smooth. This is all smoothed out now. That's awesome, right? Now I'm not going to shift my edge or anything, but okay. So all that work that I could have been doing with the blur tool, it was done instantly. Now, yes, the quick, easier ways are fun because they're quicker and they're easier, but sometimes you can lose certain things by doing it that way. So it's all depending on you and your mood and what you're willing to sacrifice or lose to make it easier. Obviously, none of the hair is touched, but since I'm redrawing that, I'm not going to do anything to that. At the moment, I may blur that here in a little bit. Now, the smoothing refine edge does not take care of the insides, so you may still need to come back with your blur tool, even after that, and take care of some of those insides. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Alright, you'll also notice, here's the before, smoothing after. You see how I lost a piece of his collar there? Anyway, I'm going to go back to the original myself. Point is, you can lose some stuff, but it does make it easier. Alright. Back to here. Blur. Let's work on that nose a little. Now, in the eyes is always a hard part, because they're going to do a lot of redrawing in there. A lot of shadowing, highlighting. So if you're going to blur any portion of the eyes, make sure you use a small brush and a low strength blur. You don't want to lose the details of the pupils. Again, you might panic because it seems blurry, but that's okay. So we're going to come back later and we're going to fix that. Okay, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to start by working on this necklace. So this black chain is beneath. It's just a black string. Always best to select the color from the actual picture. That way you don't get the wrong one. Because sometimes it looks black, but really it's a super dark gray. Also, for size, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the various pixel sizes and hold it up against that. See, 2 is perfect. Alright. Now this is trial and error. There's no way to do this. Well, there probably is. Oh, you know what helps? Huh. That still came out too light. So I'm going to draw this down. Okay. Make sure that's off, otherwise... There we go. Darker. And then straight black. There, you see how I didn't make it a perfectly hard edge? This is to keep... sorry. This is to keep that pixelation from happening. Now, big eraser. There, see at a distance? Looks as if it belongs there. Now, we're missing a bunch of pieces over here, as you see. Now, it can either be incorporated in to make it look like it's supposed to be missing those pieces. You can use select fill. For instance, select this area, and we're going to I'm just showing you. This is not how I want to do it. So, fill. content aware. Now this should be, there's different types of blending: opacity, preserve transparency, color adaptation, etc. So content aware apparently is not going to work here. If you have the newer one, there is a way to target your content aware, by the way, which is awesome. But I don't have the new one, so oops. Okay, another way would be to snag some of what's in here. There we go. Ta-da! Filled in. Now, I like it better with the empty spots. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up highlighting and making that more tangible. I am, however, going to fix, this spot. There are several ways to fix this spot. I'm going to use smudge. Ta-da, it's back to being round. Black. Let me go back up here. Now I'm actually going to make this, Control Z. There we go. I'm going to make this piece of metal. And I'll change the color, should I so design to do so. Now, how I do this is blending options, bevel, contour, voila, look at that. You can change the depth, basically how shiny it is, size, so that it all looks right, and soften it, harden it, etc., and so on and so forth. There. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, adjustments, hue saturation, should be able to lighten this. Okay. Color balance. A bit of gold. Look at that. Little gold chain. Now, most times when this is all said and done, this is about the distance it's going to be away in the picture. So those little details are up to you, though I personally believe the little details is what makes the picture. I don't see... Okay, that is still recording. Alright. Sorry about that. Had to check. Okay, moving back on. We're going to start working on our shadows and highlights now. Now, when you're working on your shadows and highlights, it's really good to know what your background's going to be, because you need to know where your light is coming from. So, have your background selected in advance to know where your light is going to be coming from. As I'm doing an obscure background for this, I can put the light anywhere. An obscure background, something more of a abstract, you place your light where you want it. In this particular case, I'm probably going to have light coming from up and left. Knowing this, you have to know where your light is coming from before you can do your shadows and highlights. If you try to do them beforehand, what you're going to end up having is the feeling and look of something being off. So, first things first, if I like everything, you don't have to merge it all, but I'm going to. Which I do, so layer, merge visible. I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to create a clipping mask. This is going to keep it strictly on this avatar, so that any shadows or highlights I do stays on him. Okay, so select a color off the avatar. The less saturation on skin, the better. And then, I need a softer brush. Go with a softer brush. You don't need to change anything in regards to Sorry, I get very distracted easily. That looks like a mess, you say. Yes, as a matter of fact, it does. But we're going to change that to multiply. If I don't like the color, I can change it further, which I don't. I want a little less saturation here, so I'm going to pull it over here to brown. There we go. That's a better shadow, in my opinion. Your shadow color is going to be different depending on your type of light, too. Sunlight is going to give more of that soft shadow, that more reddish, more saturated shadow. What's helpful is to study pictures with a lot of shadows and highlights in them, preferably ones that are natural. Google will help you with that. Now I'm taking a hard-edged brush and I'm tracing my chin. See? I want to make sure the chin has a sharp entry. I do. Okay, so now, once I have that sharp chin, I'm going to go back to a very soft brush, depending on the size, and then I'm going to go to low opacity of the eraser brush. And I'm going to start to erase some of my shadows. And see that nice blending effect? And we can create a chin shadow. Look at that. Now, obviously the shadow should match the shape of whatever it's shadowing. And then, oh, that's a little dark, right? You start playing with the opacity of your layer to get a better shadow. So here's without the shadow, with. Gives them a little depth. Now I'm not going to merge that down because I may want to play with that a little bit more later with the opacity and whatnot. Oh, sorry. So we're focusing on the bigger shadows right now. Now, as my light is coming from up here, I wouldn't have a shadow right here. Now I would over back in here because that light might be hitting that. So we'll just put a little bit there, and now I'm back to smudge tool. Though I want the soft edge for this particular smudge tool. And we're just going to, there we go. Add just a little shadow back there. Over here, maybe a little bit. Not much though. Now, anytime it goes over the edge of something, like this collar here. Oops, no, I don't want 10%. 100%, smaller brush though. See, I don't want my collar caught in this shadow. I'm going to come back and erase it off. No, I want soft. Back to low opacity. There we go. Just the barest of a shadow here. Just gives them a little more depth. Shadow on clothes is slightly different color. And right now, one of our biggest issues is our coloring is very light. Now, I learned a handy dandy trick about lightening clothes, especially dark colors. I'm pretty sure this is not what this is supposed to be used for. And it can obscure the coloring elsewhere. But if you go to image adjustments and shadows and highlights, look at that. It lightened. Oops. I'm trying to draw this down so you can see. It lightened all the clothes. Gave it texture again, etc. So I like this that way. So there This way, when we do add shadows, they're visible. Otherwise, adding shadows on black is kind of, you know, redundant. Okay, so back to the shadows. Now, I'm going to create another layer for the shadows of the clothing. And I still have it in the clipping. I'll make sure that I have a dark gray. Yes. And now, oops, the shadow. Make sure your thing is multiply. You want a harder edge because you're drawing. Alright, so if the light's coming from this way, the shadow is most likely going to be towards the bottom. That's not a great one. There we go. Make sure my eraser tool is good. Now if you want to have a perfect shadow, you remember that cropping trick I just taught you? Crop the necklace out first and set it on top. There we go. Now, bear in mind the closer to the actual item the shadow is, the closer the shadow is going to be. So, for instance, I'm not big keen on this, so Control X, I want it closer. I want this practically on top. There we go. It's casting a shadow, but it's laying against the cloth. See, adds a little bit of depth. There we go. A little bit more depth to the collar. Now, some cases, the shadow should be on both, so you shouldn't erase it. For instance, here, the shadow would be above and below. There we go. As you can tell, shadowing and highlighting is not as hard as it looks. It's just a lot of patience, and honestly, that is what most of Photoshop is. It's a lot of patience. It's taking the time to do all the little details to add in whatever is missing. Okay. Alright, here's our young gentleman without shadows. Okay. Now, you can lower the opacity even more, or even make it higher. Okay. closet? Hmm. Okay, I can't tell if this is going or not, but I hope so. Anyway, back to it. Now, most of our shadows, the little shadows we're going to do, can be done with a teeny tiny brush. For instance, it's still too big. There we go. And I'm going to go to the, oh, it's still black. Black, not good. Right about there. Okay. There we go. See, look at the depth that ear got. Alright. Now there is going to be shadows in the eyes, right underneath the eyelashes. So we're going to draw those right there. Take that over. Look at that, we have a shadow in the eyes. Very light. And I'm going to take a smaller brush, oops, much smaller brush, size 2. 2 or 1. 2 looks fine. And I'm going to switch to black. And I'm going to trace just a little bit with a smudge tool. Pull that over there. I use the smudge tool to thin out my lines too sometimes. And you might be wondering, why black? Black is more the defining, just defining at the moment. More or less, this constitutes as eyelashes, I guess, in definition. I'm going to add another streak of white in here. But not yet. Oh, we're going to go down to a 1. Again, this is just definition. This white line would be considered a highlight, not a shadow, obviously. There we go. Now our eyes look a little bit more defined in the distance. Remember all that blurring we did? We're kind of fixing that now. My epic eyelashes. Remember, up close it's not going to look as pretty as it will in the distance, so make sure your work is done for the distance, not for the closeness. Now you might be wondering, why did you put gray and white and black in those lashes? Well, that goes back to what our theme is for today. Shadows and highlights. When light catches onto your lashes, it tends to give them most people have black lashes. It tends to give them a almost grayish glow. It's the glint of light, for lack of a better term here. Oops. Okay. Let's go back down. Remember our blurry nose? We're going to fix that now. Go back into your multiply with the tiny brush and trace where the shadows already are. See, the great thing about working in Second Life stuff is they've already set up most of the shadows for you, the Skin Maker. So it shouldn't be that hard. You just trace the shadows that are already there. You can moderately create your own, obviously. There we go. Look, see, our nose is a little more defined. Now, most of this has already been shadowed for me. One of the biggest mistakes most people make is they attempt to overshadow a picture. Unless the picture is meant to be overshadowed, don't overshadow it. There's too much shadows already on this cloth for me to add too much more. And I went through all that pain to bring out more light. So at this point, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to create, go back down here, oops, and still in the clipping mask area, I'm going to create highlights. So we're going to start with the skin. Again, take a medium toned skin for your highlights. Screen or linear dodge. I start with screen, and if I don't like it, I go to linear dodge. And I'm going to start with this. My tablet's trying to not work. Oh, my battery might be dying. This might be a shorter video than you thought. Alright, so I'm going to start by tracing. Oh, make sure your opacity and everything's back up. Yes, it may seem bright, but that's okay. Mistakes happen. You can go back and fix them. Again, my Epic Smudge tool. The more, wherever the sun is coming from, is more the light that's going to be. So you want to be heavier in that jurisdiction. And we're going to take this awesome erasing brush and come back and taper away somewhere it's going to be a little darker. There we go. Notice how I'm using the natural lighting in this. To help me define where my highlights are going. Now the best part about this is you can actually use these highlights to create a certain feeling in the picture. See, it knows a lot more defined now, isn't it? not doing a sad picture today, but you can convey anger and sadness using this technique. For instance, you're usually going to highlight the brow a little. Yes, it looks like a lot. Give it a minute. Let's say I wanted to make him angry. No, I'm not going to, but I'm going to show you how I do it normally. I want epic. And you pull that light up. I'm not angry. I think I'm more sad apparently on this one. There. And remember that awesome eraser tool? Yeah. It just defines the quirk of the brow. Sometimes it's those little things that actually create the fool of the picture. Anyway, you would add also more shadows to create that effect of upset. But again, I'm not doing that right now. So, alright, I'll highlight underneath here. This one's going to get a lot of erasing too. Just want a light highlight. This particular person had a very nice avatar to work with. You don't always get a nice avatar to work with, so keep that in mind. There we go. So we're still doing highlights. We're going to do some on the clothes now. Remember where we said that light was? It was over here in this direction. Okay, I got it on screen. And look at that, just a breath of light. Not too much. Here's without, with. Once again, a little more dimension. We can probably also add some more shadows into that armpit over there, since it's not naturally over there. Now I'm going to change the color here. Actually, I need a whole new and a little smaller. Oops. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. There we go. Isn't that awesome? Make sure it's on screen. Ta-da! Pretty cool, right? Now, if we're going to add more shadows, again, another layer. You see why I personally merged mine? I'm going to multiply. I'm going to make sure this is above the highlights. And we're going to come in a little here. Just a little bit. Just enough to give it a little more definition. On the feet. Look at that. Shadows and highlights. Okay, since you guys have already seen me draw hair, I'm going to leave it at here. I hope this helped you. Thank you for watching, and I'm sorry I haven't put one out in a while.